So thank you all very, very much for joining us this morning. This is ICUJP for Friday, August 9th, 2024. If anybody's seeing this in like a time capsule or something from an advanced alien civilization, we're not as bad as you heard. Okay. Um,
Some
so
of us.
yes,
Especially this group.
that's
Some
true.
of us.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. You'll find out. You'll find out if you read magazines and stuff. Thank you all for joining us. I'm sure we'll be having people join us. In the chat, I just put a view of our ICUJP link tree up here so you can all see it. This is something that a lot of organizations use to bring together all the news items that they have going. And you can find, there's a direct link to our website. We still have those links available and for people to use the Love for Palestine action page if you want to find out whether your senator or congressperson um, is supporting, ceasefire or anything like that. You can find out here and actually get the resources to write companies that are profiting from the war machine and let them know they're not going to get any of your money. So it's a very good document that a lot of organizations have some great links and we've just kind of cobbled them together. There's pages if you want to donate. There's also stuff here about people that have spoken to us and the work that they've done, whether they're writers like Norman Solomon, um, George Lakey, Sonali Kolhatkar, people that have spoken to us about documentaries and that they've done, like Great Palace. And even if you have some time, there's a Spotify playlist of jazz and R&B focused on social justice. So you can take some time and listen to that if you want. And I pointed out that link tree because not only is it a great resource, but it's also a really good way for you to find out how to um, make a donation to ICJP because we've been doing this. It's going to be about 23 years next month, and the resources for being able to do this has gotten harder and harder to cobble together. Um, as we do more live events, prices for doing things like printing have gone up. There are other costs involved in that. So, we can very much use your support in order to keep it going and to keep this organization growing and being able to do what we do week after week and be able to give you great presentations like the ones we're going to have today. So I hope you can either go to our website or go to that link tree and support us either on a monthly basis. You can do it from PayPal, Google Wallet, or Apple Wallet, or anything that you have available. I do also want to say before we go into our reflection that I don't want to leave any of our meetings without recognizing that we are the majority of the group is based in unceded Gabrielino and Tongva land, much like the rest of the United States that we deal with, and like much of North America, most of it is unceded. So, good thing to learn our history if you can. And so we do have a reflection today, and it's from Maggie Hutchison. So, Maggie, if you are ready, be honored to hear it.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to envision us being like family so that I don't have a panic attack. I, unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. But I agreed to do this because I'm on the board. And So actually, I went to the Pacific Yearly Meeting of the Quakers in California, Northern and Southern Hawaii, and Mexico. And our speaker was my inspiration for this reflection. The theme of the Pacific Yearly Meeting, oh, well, first of all, we were held at Whittier College. And oddly enough, I was assigned to the same dorm that I was in when I went to Whittier College in 1963, the year that Richard Nixon was, I think, running for something. So the theme of our meeting was tending the transformative seeds of love within the soil of our hearts. We began by breathing and recognizing the seed within and bringing our collective focus on the seed to contemplate the growth process needed for this seed to unfold and mature and become its full potential. And the speaker continually, all through this time, said, "I invite you to breathe." She was not demanding, she was inviting. So if we can breathe too and have 5 minutes of silence. Sorry, I thought that Steve would appreciate that. In the womb, our heart is the first organ to function, and the heart is supplied with oxygen from the mother in the womb. At birth, the newborn breathes to continue the supply of oxygen. So our speaker encouraged us to breathe by saying, "I invite you to breathe." About every 20 seconds, she would remind us. And it does bring a lot of stress reduction, if nothing else, the breathing. Breathing in slowly for about 7 seconds, and then holding it for 3 seconds, and then breathing out for more than that, maybe 10 seconds. It's not important how you do it, but that was what she encouraged us to do throughout, is to use our heart as the source of love and to feed the heart by breathing deeply. The heart in the womb is the first organ that begins to function as it starts to beat. And she says, because we've had it in our bodies the longest, it can be like an elder or a guide for us. This is how we care for our, if you'll pardon the expression, inner child. As we breathe, we let God in. We start smaller than a mustard seed. Love transforms as we breathe in. Each time we breathe, we're breathing in love. We're transformational agents. We're waiting for, and we are transformed by our breathing and cooperating with our whole body. So then she talked about the whole society. When we abuse ourselves, we abuse others. When we love ourselves, we cooperate with and love others in the community. Just as the body, just as the heart is a part of the body, so we can apply this sense of cooperation to our communities. She talked about the concept of Ubuntu. Which seems like a very heart-focused concept, a way to help us cooperate with each other, just as we cooperate with our bodies to be healthy. It is a traditional African philosophy that emphasizes the interconnectedness of all the individuals and their mutual responsibility towards each other and their environment. I am because you are. You are because we are. The example they gave of the application of Ubuntu was sort of a parable, that there was a contest with a lot of fruit at the front of the room. And so the goal was to get there so you could get your share, to get there as fast as possible. So using Ubuntu, the people linked arms and they all arrived at the same time so that they could share the fruit. It's the interconnectivity of all human beings, and individuals' well-being is intricately tied to the well-being of the community. Starting long before the colonial period, they were prioritizing communal living, sharing, and mutual respect. The idea that I cannot be happy if one person is sad. And so I think I like to keep the idea of continual breathing and of continual cooperation with one another. Thank you.
That was really, really good, Maggie. You shouldn't be nervous about doing any of those. That was really good.
Well, it helps a lot to realize that I'm not in Dave's position where I have a presentation and my technical support is, well, not the support, but my technical abilities are being challenged. So I relaxed because I thought, well, it's not as difficult as Dave has. I thought about the community and I thought, I can't complain.
Mm-hmm. Sounds, good. I'm glad to hear that. So we do have a speaker this morning, and I know some of you joined specifically to hear this person. And I think he's one of those guys that a lot of people, a lot of us know from various things. I mean, I came to know him more as a board member and someone who's been very involved in ICUJP. But he also has a lot of other connections. So, and he's going to talk about one specific aspect of it. Oh, I guess a few of them. And if you want to talk about how you were born in a little log cabin in Illinois, I'm sure that's fine. So Steve is going to introduce Dave Clennon. Everybody else, if you can go on mute, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
So I was inclined to introduce Dave by saying we all know him. He's a longtime card-carrying member of ICUJP. He has one of the inaugural serial numbers on his card. But, sometimes we need to pay respect to our friends and know more fully about them. And to do that, I just looked at Dave's IMDb biography, and I'm gonna use the opening phrase. He probably knows it and wishes it would be edited. A tall, lean, sometimes bearded actor with a career lasting more than 40 years. David Clennon is also a very vocal political agitator. Sometimes I think Dave would reverse the order of those two characterizations, but I'm thrilled that such a biography exists for the public to know Dave, and that in the same breath, his political agitation is included. Personally, that's exactly how I've known him early on through Mike Farrell and work at Death Penalty Focus, and then here at ICUJP Dave has been a stand-up guy, always available, always willing to put his celebrity and his character on display for the sake of peace and justice. But I was reminded that in 1967, Dave turned in his Selective Service ID card, a federal felony at the time, and joined the draft resistance movement. His anti-war and anti-draft activities are included in the book Confronting the War Machine by Michael Foley. And his career and choices of parts and where he spends his time as an actor have reflected so much of his political convictions. That is something rare in Hollywood and something we should all deeply respect. I'm not going to continue reading his bio, but take a moment when we finish this program. Dave is really, I am in awe of his convictions and living and standing by his convictions. And that's, in essence, what he's going to talk about today. So, Dave, it is such a personal pleasure to give you this platform and to welcome you today.
Thank you, Steve. Have I unmuted myself? I guess I have. Thank you for doing all that, putting so much energy and thought into what you just said. And I hope that for the rest of my life, I can live up to the characterization that you gave me. You and I have had some very strenuous differences over the years, especially the last 2 or 3 years. But I think there was always a mutual respect for each other. And the differences that we've had lead me to take off from the invitation that Rick Banyalas put out. Such an excellent invitation without any help or consultation from me. Rick uses the word truth, and in the title of the invitation, and I would just like to strike the word truth and put the word provocations in there. I think what I may be bringing this morning is not so much truth as provocation. So I broke the talk down into 5 parts. The first part is epistemology. The second part is why foreign policy. Part 3, American Empire. Part 4, Palestine. And part 5, pacifism. We may not get to all those topics. And Rick, I beg you to stop me when I've gone on long enough or too long. So first topic, epistemology, $50 word that means the theory or science of the method and grounds of knowledge, especially with reference to its limits and its validity. How do we come to know what we know? How do we arrive at a point where we think we know something? I think that's an important question, because we are surrounded by and inundated by sources of what is called information. And I have serious doubts about the quality of the information that we're getting. In speaking of epistemology, the limits and the validity of what we think is our knowledge. And I want to talk about that because as political activists, I think we go through 3 steps. 1, we learn, we gather knowledge, we acquire information on a given situation or a given event. Secondly, we evaluate. We use our personal and collective value systems to decide what is right and what is wrong, who is right and who is wrong in any given situation or event. And our third step then is to take what we think is the appropriate action. So 1, we learn. 2, we evaluate. 3, we take action. And going back to 2, we try to apply our value system to a situation as we understand it, and then we act. And I'd like to also bring up a distinction between knowledge and belief. And I'll choose one of the most controversial things I can think of, the 2020 presidential election. I believe that Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election. He won enough votes in enough states to win the election in the Electoral College. I believe that he earned that victory, that he actually won that victory. But I don't know that. I do not possess the knowledge to say with absolute certainty that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. I was not a witness to every ballot as it was cast. I did not see every ballot in this country and abroad being counted so that I could say, I know Joe Biden won that election. So we have a tension here between what we believe and what we know. And that brings us to the role of trust. For a government to work, the vast majority of its people have to trust it. We have to trust that Joe Biden was elected in 2020, even though we have no way, we can't, it's humanly impossible to know with absolute certainty that Joe Biden won the election. And I repeat, I believe he did win the election. So trust plays a very important role. And the question that comes to mind is, how do we build trust? How do we acquire trust? How do we acquire it, and how do we require it from other people? So we depend, our society, all societies depend on a degree of trust, because we cannot be absolutely certain that we know how our government is operating, how it's functioning, and whether it's legitimate or not. So, epistemology. And the second subject I wanted to go to is why foreign policy, and coming up 3, American Empire. So, with regard to foreign policy, the question I have to ask of myself is, why do I focus on foreign policy? Why do I give more of my attention and energy to my government's actions abroad than I give to my government's actions at home? And I come to this conclusion. The way our government treats a very significant part of its population, I can only call it cruelty. The United States government, our government, treats a huge, let's say, minority, maybe more than a minority, of our fellow citizens with cruelty. People sleeping under bridges, mass incarceration, food insecurity, and that list goes on. The cruelty that the United States of America inflicts upon its own people. That is cause for concern. That's why I value projects like Anthony Manousis's housing and that his housing project that he carries on with his wife. Things like that are so valuable. Death penalty focus comes to mind. And we all know organizations that work energetically, diligently, tirelessly to improve the lot of our own citizens because they suffer serious cruelties, frequently on a daily basis. When I look around the world, it seems to me that the cruelty that we inflict upon our own citizens is minor compared to what our government does to people in other parts of the world. And I think everyone recognizes that. You compare the way people are treated in this country to the way people are being treated now in Gaza. For example, just take Gaza. There is almost no comparison between the cruelty that our government inflicts abroad and the cruelty that it inflicts here. And that cruelty inflicted here is very serious. But I would say that the cruelty our government inflicts abroad is almost in multiple orders of increase beyond that. And one of the most interesting sources that I discovered is a book by a man named William Blum called Killing Hope. Killing Hope was a revision of an earlier book that he did about the history of the CIA. And in Killing Hope, I think, if I recall correctly, William Blum totals a death toll around the world since 1945 of 55 million people killed, directly or indirectly, by the United States government. So that's why I put my focus, my attention, my energy on foreign policy over domestic policy. I don't want to neglect the injustices that we have at home. But if I have limited energy, I put my energy into stopping the greater horrors that we inflict on other people around the world. So, epistemology, how do we know what we think we know? Emphasis on foreign policy over domestic policy. Third topic is, for me, is the American empire. There is a phrase, the enemy of the people. Henrik Ibsen wrote a play called Enemy of the People. It's a powerful phrase. And I believe that the American empire is the greatest enemy of the people of the world in my lifetime. And I didn't think very much in my early political activism. I didn't think about the American empire. I wouldn't say I had a concept of the American empire. So over the last 4-5 decades, people on this call and I have opposed wars in Vietnam. We opposed the violent overthrow of the government of Chile in 1973. We opposed US military intervention in Central America. We opposed the shock and awe attack on Iraq, Afghanistan, Yugoslavia, something I was barely aware of as it was happening, Syria, Libya, Yemen, one war after another. And I finally realized that we peace and justice advocates weren't fighting a coincidental series of wars. We were opposing something called the American empire. And all of those horrible wars and terrible actions stem from the American empire and its cruelty and exploitation and murder of people in other parts of the world. And my sense is that we, peace and justice advocates, could not succeed in destroying or dismantling the American empire. We've tried for decades, and we couldn't do it. Another point about the American empire is that it is sucking the life out of the American Republic. It's strangling the American Republic. The American empire is suffocating the American Republic. One of the reasons so many of our fellow citizens are suffering is because the American empire draws so many resources and so much energy out of the American Republic that we find ourselves in poverty when it comes to taking care of our own people. And the poverty that is inflicted upon them in the mother country, that poverty is due to the amount of money that is drawn from, and other resources that is drawn from the Republic to finance the empire. So the empire is literally sucking the life out of the Republic. And I think you can, if you look at history, I think the same thing occurred with the Roman Empire. We know how the once venerable Senate of Rome became a charade. During the British Empire, life at home for many people was impoverished, and many people, working class people, lower middle class people, farmers, were sent abroad to fight and die for the British Empire. So the empire is real, and as far as we have been concerned so far, the empire is invincible. Right now, the American empire is being clobbered on at least two fronts: in Ukraine and in Palestine and the rest of the Middle East. The American empire is taking serious blows, and I would like to believe the American empire is declining and falling because of unsuccessful wars on two fronts at this time. So I feel that the work that we have tried to do over the years to dismantle the American empire is being done by other people right now. And the American empire is declining. And we are entering a multipolar world instead of a unipolar world. And I think we need to consider that when we look at the conflicts in Europe and in the Middle East. So that's my riff on the American empire. I talked about epistemology, why focus on foreign policy, the American empire, and fourth, I would like to speak about Palestine, and fifth, I would like to speak about pacifism, the theory and practice of nonviolence. And part four, Palestine. There is, I think we all have a sense that there was a turning point in the history of Palestine, and maybe a turning point in the history of the world, that occurred on October 7th, 2023. And we all have different views of what happened on October 7th. So I would like to share my characterization, my view of what happened that day. A military organization called the Al-Qassam Brigades knocked down a portion of the fence that surrounds Gaza, that part of the fence that makes it the world's biggest, most highly populated outdoor prison. The Al-Qassam Brigade broke down that fence and moved through it. Other members of the Al-Qassam Brigade mounted little airplanes, that's all I can call them, and entered the part of Israel that neighbored that area of Gaza. When the Al-Qassam brigades broke through that fence and began their military operation against the military outposts that were ensuring the imprisonment of the people of Gaza, when they broke through that fence, they were followed naturally by other Gazans, Palestinians, who were not members of the Al-Qassam brigades. I'll get back to that in a minute. So the Al-Qassam brigades attacked military facilities, Israeli military facilities, IDF, Israel Defense Forces facilities. This was a military action against an opposing military force. It was successful. People were killed on both sides. This was a legitimate military action in resistance of the occupation and oppression of the Palestinian people. Israeli uniformed military personnel were killed. Israeli uniformed military personnel were captured and taken prisoner. The Al-Qassam Brigade moved on into that, further into that area of Israel, and they stormed one or more kibbutzes. And they killed people in the kibbutzes. Children were killed. Thai foreign workers were killed. And that's where I think the Western community, which might accept the purely military operation that preceded this, begin to condemn the Al-Qassam brigades for atrocities. The assumption is that the kibbutzes are off limits. A kibbutz is not a legitimate target of a military operation. I think that the image we have of a kibbutz is something like a benign hippie commune. Kibbutzes are not benign hippie communes. They are armed outposts of a settler colonial regime based in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. They're armed outposts. They are part of the occupation, and they are part of the oppression of the Palestinian people, including the Gazan people. So in my view, a kibbutz is a legitimate target of a military operation which is designed to weaken the military forces of the occupiers and oppressors. kibbutz serves a military purpose. It's part of the occupation. And Al-Qassam Brigade's attack on one or more kibbutzes, I'm not sure there was one besides Be'eri. That attack was legitimate. In the course of that attack, there was crossfire, and children were killed, and foreign workers from Thailand were killed. I can't sit in judgment upon the members of the Al-Qassam Brigade and say, you murdered those people deliberately. Those people were killed in a crossfire between Israeli Defense Forces and armed occupants of the kibbutz. And I'm sure we'll get questions and comments on that point later. The Al-Qassam Brigade was not expecting this to happen, but there was a musical event, a concert taking place in that same area. And to my knowledge, the Al-Qassam Brigades were unaware of that. But as they moved forward into Israel, they encountered people who had been participating in that rave. I forget what it was. It always seemed to me that it was kind of obscene to have an event like that within 3 kilometers of the pit of hell, which was Gaza. Obscene. So the Al-Qassam Brigade encounters partygoers, and I believe that the Al-Qassam Brigades killed many members of that, many participants in that event. And I think that we white Western observers think that that was a kind of atrocity. I have had some military training, and I have some idea of, I was never a member of the armed forces, but I had military training as a cadet in the Reserve Officers Training Corps. And so it's possible for me to have some idea of what it is like to be an infantry soldier moving forward in enemy territory and having a sense of self-preservation, taking action against any human being that I see on the other side. Keep in mind that any Israeli civilian can carry a weapon, and many do carry weapons, or they have them within easy reach. So I see 200, 300 people in front of me. Any one of them, or many of them, could be carrying a weapon. Anderson Cooper did a special program on this concert, and one of the survivors said something very interesting. She said that the concert promoters, the concert organizers who invited people to come and attend this event, this woman testified that the concert organizers said, you don't need to bring your guns. And I was stunned by that statement. You don't need to bring your guns. That told me that many Israelis carry guns or that many Israelis going to this event would have brought guns with them. So I'm an Al-Qassam soldier. I'm moving forward into enemy territory. I see Israelis. I don't know whether one of them is armed. Many of them are armed. I don't know. They are my enemy, whether they're wearing a uniform or not. They are my occupiers and oppressors, and they could kill me. So I don't doubt that the Al-Qassam Brigade soldiers did kill concert goers, revelers. I don't doubt that they killed some of those people who were not in uniform and who were not carrying guns. But I'm a soldier. I'm vulnerable. I'm in enemy territory. I have to put myself in the shoes of the Al-Qassam soldiers before I pass judgment on them. Finally, we are becoming more and more aware, more and more information is leaking out about how the Israel Defense Forces, in responding to the Al-Qassam Brigade's attack, killed their own citizens. In some cases deliberately, because they did not want their own citizens or their own soldiers to be taken prisoner. So that is another factor. So our immediate judgment, our immediate condemnation of what we call Hamas, what I'm calling the Al-Qassam Brigades, our immediate condemnation needs to be revisited. Because October 7th provided the pretext for what we're seeing now, which I think could legitimately be called genocide. The International Court of Justice is deliberating towards coming to a determination about whether what Israel is doing right now constitutes genocide. Let's say it's mass murder. Let's call it serial massacre, daily massacre, slaughter, whatever you want to call it. That action by Israel is, in some sense, in many people's minds, justified or understandable as a response to the Al-Qassam Brigade's actions on October 7th. And I think we really need to revisit that. We need to think about the right of the Palestinian people to take up arms against their occupiers and their oppressors. So the media focuses on an organization called Hamas, and that becomes the stand-in for the entire Palestinian armed resistance. Hamas, which they have succeeded in demonizing over a period of at least 20 years. So we, as citizens of the collective West, hear the word Hamas and we have a reaction. Go back 20 years, we hear the word Saddam. We have a reaction because we have been indoctrinated. We have been persuaded over weeks and months and years that Hamas is a demonic force, a terrorist force. So I would like to. I'd like us to rethink that. I'd like us to consider what the rights of the Palestinian people are after decades of occupation and oppression. What are their rights? Do they have a right to armed resistance? And are we allowed, am I allowed, sitting in the comfort of my Western house on the west coast of California, am I allowed to say, oh no, you do have a right to armed resistance and armed self-defense. You do, but Hamas is the wrong one. I don't want you to be represented by Hamas. I'm making that choice. I'm telling you, you can't do that. So I would like us to think about Hamas as one part of the Palestinian armed resistance. And it is a fact, and the Al-Qassam brigades and Hamas, the political side of the Al-Qassam brigades, freely acknowledge that they are not acting alone. They have comrades in other organizations which are smaller but equally committed to armed resistance for the Palestinian people. The PIJ, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Al-Qassam brigades, and the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. These organizations are all working in coordination right now, resisting the Israeli invasion of Gaza. So I think when we hear Hamas, we should think Palestinian armed resistance. And we should ask ourselves whether Palestinian armed resistance is legitimate or not. So that brings me to the final topic, and I'll be as quick as I can about this. I question. I want to ask questions about the role of pacifism in the peace and justice movement. And this is a provocative question. It's my feeling that the pacifist philosophy and practice has merged with left theory and practice. And the pacifist philosophy and organization and left organizations' activities have become merged. And a lot of people who consider themselves to be leftists or advocates for justice have paralyzed themselves, I think, by adopting the values of pacifism. So therefore, no armed resistance is justifiable. What the people of Donbass did in Ukraine, resisting the Banderite Nazi government of Ukraine that overthrew a legitimately elected president in 2014, maybe we should condemn the people's militias of the regions of Donetsk and Lugansk. maybe we should declare that they have no right to take up arms to defend themselves against the Azov battalion, the neo-Nazi battalion trained by NATO, trained by National Guard from Florida. Are we allowed to condemn any and all use of armed force? And I feel that, to put it really bluntly, well, before I do that, let me just say that I respect individual pacifists. I respect people who make a personal choice never to use violence in their own lives. I respect that individual choice. Where I would like to draw the line is when I am confronted with militant evangelical pacifism that assumes moral superiority over people who might need to take up arms to resist their occupation and oppression. People who may have tried nonviolence many, many, many times. I'll just mention the Great March of Return, the Great March of Return in southern Gaza. Look it up. So I think we need, at least intellectually, to disentangle concepts of justice, Marxist concepts, maybe libertarian concepts, socialist concepts of justice. We need to disentangle them from pacifism and say, is the justice that we are striving to achieve possible if we remove from people elsewhere in the world the right to take up arms? And to put it shortly and bluntly, my feeling is that pacifism is a dead end on the road to justice. It's a dead end. So I reckon that that's enough for me, and I doubt whether I'm going to leave it to Rick to decide whether that 9-minute video, which really addresses the issue of epistemology, what do we know? People I love, people I respect, people whose values I share, come to profoundly different conclusions from mine because one or the other of us thinks we know something that we don't really know. Epistemology. Before you apply your value system, you have to know, you have to have a very clear impression of what you are trying to learn about. And that brings me to the mainstream media. Of course, we're immersed in imperial propaganda. The New York Times, MSNBC, the Washington Post, CNN, and sad to say, sometimes our own media get it wrong. Democracy Now! Got some things really wrong over the last 3 years, and The Nation got things wrong, in my opinion, based on my studies, which have been obsessive and compulsive. So I don't know, Rick. I mean, that video addresses the issue, but it's 9 minutes long. I think we should move to questions and answers, because somebody has really laid out a lot of provocations. So
I think that, and what I can do is when we do the YouTube video, I can add the link to the video you sent me. And we can also maybe do the other one. We'll figure that one out too.
yeah.
So thank you, Dave. This is one thing that struck me as you were speaking, and I sent it to Steve as a sidebar. You were talking about U.S. foreign policy, and it reminded me about a joke that a great comedian, the late Barry Crimmins, said. When people used to ask him, well, if you don't like America, why don't you leave? And he used to say, well, I don't want to be a victim of its foreign policy.
Wow. That's great.
And yeah, and another one was this is the only country where you can denigrate socialism in a public school, right? So yeah, I thought that was really that you got me thinking about that. But we have a couple of questions. Steve, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Rick and I may have had parallel thoughts, but I invited Dave to speak today because I always find his comments, as he put it himself, provocative. I'm very grateful that he framed it in this epistemological framework. Because Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, we're all entitled to our own opinions. We're not entitled to our own facts. And Dave is right. He and I have disagreed over the years on various issues. There's a lot in what Dave said today that I agree with. I think his overall analysis of American empire is spot on. But I, in my opinion, fundamentally disagree with his analysis of October 7. At one point, you said we can't sit in judgment, but you made a lot of judgments today about what was legitimate and not legitimate about October 7. This is a recorded program, and many people will watch this. When Dave said in response to me that he would accept our invitation to speak today, he previewed that he may say some things that I or others would disagree with. And that's the beauty of ICUJP. We provide a forum. You won't hear Dave's analysis on any of the mainstream media, which he just cataloged. And I love that about ICUJP, and we've done this for 23 years. Our discuss list says that these are personal opinions and not necessarily the opinions of ICUJP or its board of directors. The board speaks through its own signed statements when we want to speak on behalf of ICUJP itself as an organization. I only want to add that while I was listening to Dave, I was going to disagree with some of his judgments, but I decided not to have a battle of opinions. And I simply looked up issues of the Al-Qassam brigades. And I'll put this in the chat shortly. But on July 17, after an exhaustive investigation, Human Rights Watch issued a 236-page report on the Palestinian armed group's October 7 assault on Israel. Now, these were eyewitness accounts, as Dave said about something else. He wasn't there. I wasn't there on October 7. These eyewitnesses were. And the summary in Human Rights Watch's release of its report is as follows. Hamas's military wing, the Qassam brigades, and at least 4 other Palestinian armed groups committed numerous war crimes and crimes against humanity against civilians during the October 7, 2023 assault on southern Israel, Human Rights Watch said in a report released today. Governments with influence over the armed group should press for the urgent release of civilian hostages, an ongoing war crime, and for those responsible to be brought to justice. The summary of the report says it found dozens of cases of serious violations of international humanitarian law by Palestinian armed groups at nearly all of the civilian attack sites on October 7. These include war crimes and crimes against humanity of murder, hostage taking, and other grave offenses. Human Rights Watch has separately investigated the conduct of the Israeli forces and also issued reports on their numerous violations of international law. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, has issued, or the prosecutor has requested the issuance of arrest warrants against Israeli leaders and Hamas leaders for the conduct since October 7. So folks need to take all of that information into consideration. They could consider the diversity of opinions regarding what Dave had to say today. I think Dave would agree that epistemologically we need to dig deeper. We need to learn as much as we can about all of those atrocities on both sides. I'm going to stop there. I'll put the link to this story so that people present right now and those seeing this recording will have an opportunity for that kind of input, and we'll see what the international courts. I don't know that a country has filed. The International Court of Justice, which did find a plausible case of genocide against Israel, has no jurisdiction over Hamas. It only has jurisdiction over certain established governments. And one of the tragedies in all this is that Palestine is not considered an established government in certain jurisdictions. I am going to leave it there, and I look forward to other comments, and I'll put the Human Rights Watch report in the chat.
Thank you, Steve. Carol Francis, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I have, and many of us have had serious problems with Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International on bias issues. But I wanted to talk about, I want to start by saying The speaker today is one of my oldest friends, not in age of him, but I met Dave on a picket line in Nicaragua in the 80s. And we were picketing to stop US aggression, war against the people of Nicaragua. And somebody said, see that guy over there? He was in the movie Missing. That's how I met Dave. Anyway, speaking of Nicaragua, there's his, at the time, a newsletter. Actually, it was like a newsprint magazine, a few pages, called Win. And it was the voice of the nonviolent movement. And just before the Sandinistas were elected into power, and they were still struggling against Somoza, the dictator, Win came out with an editorial endorsing the Sandinista struggle. And I remember the words. The words were, how can we, the voice of the nonviolent movement, endorse an armed struggle of a people? And the answer in the same article was, we don't believe we have the right to live in our comfortable homes in the United States, not facing violence for the most part, to tell people who live where a dictator can break into your home at gunpoint, order everybody in the family to stand in front of their house and mow them down and walk off. We don't have the right to tell them that they can't do this or that because it's violent. They have to stay nonviolent. And somebody said recently about Hamas, you don't have to agree with every tactic a group makes to support what they're trying to do, which is to liberate themselves from colonization. And Dave, I'm so glad you talk about US empire. People more and more, like in the socialist program, talk about America, the American empire's ending itself pretty soon. And somebody, I don't remember who this was, said, I really admire much about the US, its republic, not its empire. And that was somebody like Iraqi or somebody from a country that was being bombarded. And he said, yeah, I admire much about the US, but its republic, not its empire. And I was just hoping that you could say, Dave, something about your own experience being attacked brutally and pushed around by when you were at a protest.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping to show, but I'm afraid that Rick would have to go through a platform called WeTransfer in order to liberate that particular video. I want to reinforce what you said. I don't have great reverence. I do not have great reverence for Human Rights Watch or for Amnesty International. I think they are both subject to political pressure from outside and from within. And I would like to know, I don't think there were any impartial witnesses to what happened on October 7th. And I don't trust a word out of the mouths of most Israelis, although there are some courageous people who do speak out and who have earned my respect. So the event that Carol Francis is referring to, which took place just before I went to see her play on June 23rd. I learned a lot at that play, but I was coming from the demonstration in front of, let me see if I can find it. I'll let that go for the moment. A synagogue, and I want to say it was the Adath Torah synagogue in the Pico Robertson neighborhood, opened its doors to a real estate operation called My Home in Palestine. My Home in Israel, sorry, way off. My Home in Israel. And they were selling property, Palestinian land in the West Bank, to create what they called an Anglo community or an Anglo neighborhood in the West Bank. It doesn't get much more obscene than that. So Palestinians and Palestinian supporters gathered in front of that synagogue on a Sunday and stood in front of the entrance to discourage people from going in and buying land that belonged to the Palestinian people. And they had a rally there. It was a pretty small group, and I arrived late, so I saw some of our people clustered around in a kind of semicircle in front of a building. I didn't know what the building was. And as I arrived, more and more Zionists were coming to the site. And after maybe 15 minutes, I would say that the Palestinian demonstration was surrounded 180 degrees by a mob of Zionists who outnumbered the Palestinian group, including me, by, I would say, at least 2-1, and eventually 3-1 or more. And they were extremely aggressive. And some fights broke out. And the police, the LAPD, pushed our rally, our demonstration, our group, pushed us west on the sidewalk in Pico Boulevard all the way to the Eilat Bakery. And at that point, I crossed the street and several other people crossed the street, and we tried to regroup after being shoved away by the LAPD. We tried to regroup on the other side of the street. And it was at that point that I was accosted, I was bullied, I was threatened by a crowd of Zionists. And the important point of this is not really what happened to me, but it's the activity of the Zionist militia, Magen Am. And our city council, with the connivance of our mayor, are proposing to give Magen Am, the Zionist militia, and similar groups who are supposedly guaranteeing Zionist security, $2 million. And it was also after that demonstration that Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass went before the cameras and condemned us for anti-Semitism. You know, okay, so that's my story about, and I wish I had the video, and maybe I can get it to Rick in time to put it up on the ICUJP website. So, Carol Francis, did I address your question? Did I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dave, can you address your arrest and the status of your proceedings?
I sometimes get so frustrated, and I've attended, I would say, more than 50 demonstrations, maybe 65 or 70 demonstrations since October the 8th. And I meet with my comrades on the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica just about every Sunday, and we hold our signs, and we get affirmations, and we get insults, and we get curses. But I get frustrated, and I don't know what to do. So I cut a cardboard stencil that said "Free Palestine." And I went out to locations around Santa Monica, and I put the stencil on the sidewalk, and I spray painted through it the words "Free Palestine." And I never made any attempt to hide my activity. And then one night, evening, I went to a corner in my neighborhood, my corner, and I spray painted "Free Palestine" on the sidewalk there. And one of my neighbors called the police. I walked slowly away from the site where I had done my artwork, and I got in my car, and I drove slowly half a block to my house. I went inside, I waited, the police came, and I was cited for misdemeanor vandalism. So I'm a vandal, and I admit that I'm a vandal. So the city attorney of Santa Monica, one of their younger deputies, sent me an email and said, "If you will pay $200 restitution, we will not file these charges," meaning I would never have to go to court. I wrote a letter, an email haggling a little bit with that. He wrote an email back and said, "There's no room for negotiation." I emailed him, "Okay, yes. How do I pay the $200? In the meantime, another city deputy attorney had read my sort of jokey, haggling email, and he and his supervisor, who has never been named, decided to file the charges against me. And so I was forced to, sorry, my phone is just, okay, I'm back. So that's that story. I had to go to court. I represented myself before the judge, and the prosecutor, city attorney who was there representing the city, proposed the exact same offer in exchange for a dismissal of the charges. So that's where the case stands right now. And Steve, you may regret asking that question, because it's a long story about a little incident. But I guess it just shows that people get frustrated sometimes, and you don't know what to do. You go to demonstrations, you hold signs, you chant, and still the slaughter goes on. So you do things that, I sometimes look at what I did and I think that was silly. It was, it was juvenile. But that, I guess that story just says something about the frustration we all feel. It's not just we all feel this frustration, and we want to do something about it. And so that's that story.
Yeah.
But I think one of the main questions is an understanding of the difference between what you call pacifism and strategic nonviolence. Strategic nonviolence. There's a big difference.
Yeah, that's a valid distinction. I agree with completely. Regarding epistemology, if you want to know what is happening in Palestine, there are two indispensable sources, podcasts or web pages. One is Mondo Weiss, Mondo Weiss, one word, Mondo Weiss. The other is the Electronic Intifada. Electronic Intifada. If you don't consult with at least one of those sources, I refuse to take you seriously. Electronic Intifada, and Mondo Weiss.
Thank you. So this has been very enlightening, and I am very glad that we did this talk today. So you can do it next week too, if you want, in ensuing weeks. But thank you very much. This is really good.
What?
I'm sorry.
Here, here. Yay, Dave.
Thank you. Thanks, Betsy.
So we have time for some short announcements. These are about things that are happening. In the fact that we don't have that much time, I would encourage anybody that's making an announcement, if you have a link, put it in the chat, and that's a great way to get it to everybody. But if you have one to make right now, please electronically or physically raise your hand. I do not see anything up, so okay. Dave, thank you very much. You know how I feel about you and your work and stuff. So
well, thanks for inviting me, Rick. It was an honor and a little overwhelming to be asked to do this. So thank you.
Let's just hold up in the light the innumerable victims of all this. There is such a need for healing, such a need for restorative practices. And October 7th is not understood apart from a long history of war on Palestine, and that's not understood apart from a long history of just brutal anti-Semitism in the West. And if we're going to be a faith-based organization, we simply must have insight about healing and what makes that possible, and become not just social critics, although that's important, but healers as well. It's just so tragic. There's injustice in every direction you look. here, but beyond that, it's tragedy. It's just such a tragedy. So I just hope we can lift up the victims, the children, the parents, the relatives, the uncles, the aunts in tears and bereft, and people with no place to go, and on and on and on and on. So let's just lift it all up and pray for ways of finding spiritual power and effectiveness that breaks through the hate.
Thank you, Rick, for corralling the cats and facilitating so well today, and to Maggie for your lovely reflection. Thank you, Dave, for your courage, the courage of your convictions. And thank you to everybody who participated today. Welcome back next Friday. The board of directors is meeting at 9:40 on this screen to continue to plan the September 8 Regus event. To the rest of you, be safe, be well, good luck on your protest up there, and we will see you next Friday.